Mom, why does everyone get steak while I get this old bread?
He should be grateful he gets anything. Enjoy your dinner, Vanessa, because in 3 days, one document will take everything away.
The moment my sister slid a piece of stale bread toward my 6-year-old son and said, "He should be grateful he gets anything," I knew she had just made the most expensive mistake of her life. Hello, my name is Claire Bennett, and for most of my life, I believed that keeping peace in a family meant swallowing every insult with a smile. I was wrong. Sometimes a smile is not forgiveness. Sometimes it is the last warning people never realize they received. This happened on a Saturday evening at my parents' house in Cedar Ridge, Ohio. My mother had called it a family celebration. My father had finally retired after 38 years as an electrician, and she wanted everyone together for a special dinner. My son Noah had been excited all week. "Will Grandpa tell the story about the raccoon again?" he asked me in the car. "Probably twice," I said. Noah laughed. He loved my father, even though my father had never made much effort to know him. Children are generous that way. They give adults more chances than we deserve. When we arrived, the smell of grilled steak filled the house. The dining table looked like something from a magazine. White plates, folded cloth napkins, candles, baked potatoes, asparagus, warm rolls, and a platter of thick ribeye steak sat in the center. My sister, Vanessa, was already there with her husband, Eric, and their 2 children, Amazon and Lily. My brother Daniel had brought his girlfriend. There were 11 seats around the table, but only 10 place settings. I noticed immediately. "Mom," I said quietly. "Where should Noah sit?" She barely looked at me. "There's a folding chair in the laundry room." I found the chair, placed it between mine and my father's, and brought a plate from the kitchen. Noah did not complain. He sat down carefully and placed his hands in his lap. Then my mother served dinner. She gave my father the first steak, then Vanessa's family, then Daniel and his girlfriend, then me. When the platter reached Noah, there was nothing left. He looked at the empty platter and then at me. "It's okay, Mom," he whispered. "I can eat a roll." Before I could speak, Vanessa pulled the basket of warm rolls toward her side of the table. "Those are for the people eating dinner," she said. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood her. "Noah is eating dinner," I said. Vanessa cut into her steak. "Mom didn't know you were bringing him." I told Mom we were both coming. On my mother's side, as though I had created an embarrassing scene. "Claire, please. There was a misunderstanding. Don't ruin your father's night." Noah stared at his empty plate. His cheeks were turning pink. He always blushed when he was trying not to cry. I pushed my untouched steak onto his plate. "Here, sweetheart, take mine." My father finally spoke. "Don't be dramatic. The boy is too young for a whole steak anyway." Noah quietly pushed the plate back toward me. "I'm not hungry anymore." That hurt more than anything they had said. My sister stood, walked to the pantry, and returned holding a plastic bag. She removed one dry heel of bread. A small patch of green mold marked one corner. She tore off the moldy part, dropped the rest onto Noah's plate, and smiled. "There, problem solved. He should be grateful he gets anything." Everyone saw it. Nobody stopped her. My mother looked down at her potatoes. My father drank his wine. Eric smirked. Daniel pretended to answer a message on his phone. And suddenly, I remembered another dinner from 2 years earlier. Vanessa had been sitting in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, shaking so badly she could not hold a cup. Her boutique had failed. She had used business credit cards to pay personal bills, fallen behind on rent, and borrowed money from people who were threatening legal action. She needed $18,000 within 48 hours. "Please," she had whispered. "If Eric finds out, he'll leave me. Mom and Dad will never forgive me. You're the only person who can save me." I emptied my emergency savings. I delayed replacing my old car. I canceled the first real vacation Noah and I had ever planned. I paid the debt directly so Vanessa would not face a lawsuit. She promised to repay me in 6 months. She never returned $1. Instead, she bought a new SUV the following spring and told everyone Eric had received a bonus. Now she was feeding my child stale bread, while her own children ate steak bought with money from a family I had quietly supported for years. I looked around that table, and something inside me became very still. I did not yell. I did not throw a plate. I did not remind Vanessa about the $18,000. I simply smiled. "You're right," I said. "The problem is solved." Then I stood, helped Noah put on his jacket, and took his hand. My mother frowned. "Where are you going?" "We haven't served cake. We're going to dinner." "Claire," my father warned, "if you walk out now, don't expect us to chase you." I looked at him. "I don't." As we reached the front door, Vanessa called after me. "Try not to make everything about money." Not everyone is lucky enough to be successful. I turned back and met her eyes. That is exactly what this is about, I said. You just don't know it yet. Outside, Anoa remained quiet until I buckled him into the car. Then he asked, did I do something bad? That question broke my heart. I knelt beside him. No, you did nothing wrong. The adults behaved badly. And I should have taken you away sooner. Aunt Vanessa doesn't like me. What Aunt Vanessa likes or dislikes does not decide your value. He nodded, but I knew words alone would not erase what had happened. I drove him to a small restaurant near our apartment. He ordered a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. When the waitress heard it had been a difficult night, she added a scoop of ice cream with a candle. Noah smiled again. But while he ate, my phone began to vibrate. Mom, you embarrassed your father. Dad, you owe everyone an apology. Vanessa, stop acting like a victim. Daniel, you know how Vanessa is. Let it go. That last message bothered me most. You know how she is. Those 5 words had excused Vanessa's behavior since childhood. She could lie, insult, borrow, steal, and humiliate because that was simply how she was. Meanwhile, I was expected to repair whatever she damaged because I was the responsible one. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I opened the locked drawer in my desk. Inside was a blue folder containing copies of every financial agreement tied to my family. Most people believed I worked as an ordinary accountant. In truth, I was the chief financial officer of a regional construction company. I understood contracts, debt, and ownership better than anyone at that dinner table. Over the previous 7 years, I had become the invisible foundation under my family's comfortable life. I paid $8,000 when my father needed heart surgery and his insurance would not cover everything. I covered Daniel's final year of college. I paid the property taxes when my parents nearly lost their home. I gave Vanessa $18,000 to rescue her business disaster. But the largest secret involved the house itself. 4 years earlier, my parents had owed nearly $112,000 on their mortgage. My father had been injured and could not work. The bank had begun foreclosure proceedings. My parents came to me in tears. I purchased the mortgage through a small holding company my attorney had created, Bennett Family Holdings. And then I refinanced the debt privately at almost no interest. My parents signed a new agreement giving them the right to live in the house, as long as they made modest monthly payments, and maintained the property. They told the rest of the family that the bank had generously restructured the loan. They never told anyone that I controlled it. At first, I had not wanted control. I wanted them safe. But over time, their payments became late, then partial, then non-existent. I covered insurance, taxes, and repairs. According to my records, I had paid more than $76,000 beyond the original arrangement. 3 months before the retirement dinner, my parents had signed another document. They wanted $25,000 for a retirement celebration, home improvements, and a trip. In exchange, they transferred the deed to Bennett Family Holdings while retaining a 12-month right of residence, provided they followed the occupancy agreement. One condition was simple: no permanent resident could be added without written permission. As I reviewed the file, I noticed something strange. The utility bills had increased sharply, so had water use. A recent insurance inspection mentioned converted space in the basement. I called my attorney, Rachel Cole, the next morning. I need you to review the house agreement, I said. Did something happen? Yes. But I think something else has been happening for months. Rachel spent the day checking public records. By late afternoon, she called me back. Claire, your sister registered her failed boutique's new online business at your parents' address 6 months ago. That's not enough to prove she lives there. No, but her children are enrolled in the district using that address. Eric changed the address on his driver's license. And their old landlord filed an eviction action 5 months ago. I closed my eyes. Vanessa and her family had moved into my parents' basement. Everyone had hidden it from me. That explained the missing place setting. The dinner had not been a simple family gathering. Vanessa's family already lived there. Noah and I were the outsiders. Then Rachel found the second secret. Vanessa had applied for a business loan, using the house as collateral. She had submitted an old copy of the deed, showing my parents as owners. My father had signed a letter claiming the property was free of other claims. The application was still pending, but the requested amount was $90,000. If approved, they intended to borrow against a house they no longer owned. That could be fraud, Rachel said carefully. I remembered my father refusing to look at Noah's empty plate. My mother protecting the evening instead of her grandson. Daniel telling me to let it go. They had not merely disrespected my child, they had gathered at a table inside my property while secretly trying to risk that property for Vanessa again. Prepare the notice, I said. Which notice? Rachel asked. All of them. On Monday morning, 3 days after the dinner, a courier arrived at my parents' house with one large envelope. The first document inside was a formal notice of breach of the occupancy agreement. It listed the unauthorized residence, the unapproved business, the missed payments, and the fraudulent loan application. The document gave my parents 30 days to correct the violations or leave the property. Attached was a demand letter requiring Vanessa to repay the $18,000 she had borrowed from me, along with a copy of the signed repayment agreement she had apparently forgotten existed. There was also a cease and desist notice sent to the lender, confirming that neither Vanessa nor my parents owned the house and had no authority to pledge it as collateral. One document changed everything: the recorded deed proving Bennett Family Holdings owned the house. My phone began ringing at 9:14 that morning. I let it ring. At 9:17 my mother called again. At 9:20 my father. At 9:22 Vanessa sent a message containing nothing but "Anlandediudo." At 9:31 Daniel wrote, "Call Dad, this is serious." I replied, so was leaving my child without dinner. At noon my parents arrived at my office without an appointment. Security called upstairs. "Send them to conference room 3, I said. When I entered, my mother was crying. My father's face was red. Vanessa had come with them, wearing the same expensive coat she had worn at dinner. My father slapped the document onto the table. "You can't throw us out of our own house." "It is not your house," I said. "You signed the deed." We thought that was paperwork for the $25,000. Rachel, seated beside me, opened a copy of the agreement. The deed was explained in writing and at the signing. "You were represented by an independent attorney." My mother turned to me. "We are your parents. And Noah is your grandson." Vanessa leaned forward. "This is insane. You are destroying the whole family over one dinner." "No," I said. "That dinner showed me the family had already been destroyed. I simply stopped paying to hide the damage." She laughed bitterly. "You think you can demand $18,000. That money was a gift." Rachel slid the signed promissory note across the table. Vanessa's smile disappeared. "You promised monthly payments beginning 2 years ago," I said. "You made none." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then sell the SUV," my mother gasped. "How can you be so cold?" That was when I took out my phone and placed a photograph on the table. I had taken it before leaving Saturday night. It showed Noah's empty plate, the dry piece of bread, and the steak surrounding him. "Cold?" I asked. "He is 6 years old. Every adult at that table had food. Not one of you offered him a bite. Vanessa gave him bread with mold torn off it, and all of you watched." My father looked away. "I spent years protecting you," I continued. "I paid medical bills, taxes, tuition, debts, and repairs. I protected you from embarrassment. I protected you from consequences. And you confused my help with weakness." For the first time, nobody interrupted me. "Here are your choices," I said. "Vanessa and her family leave the house within 7 days. You cancel every attempt to borrow against the property. You follow the occupancy agreement and begin making payments. Vanessa signs a repayment plan for the $18,000. If you do those things, Mom and Dad may remain until the 12-month residence period ends. If not, we proceed immediately." Vanessa stood so quickly her chair struck the wall. "You would make my children homeless." I stood too. "No. You risked their home when you lied on a loan application. You are an adult. Their safety is your responsibility, just as Noah's safety is mine." She pointed at me. "You always thought you were better than me." "I never did. I only thought you would someday become better than this." She left without another word. My parents stayed. My mother tried guilt, tears, and memories. My father tried anger. None of it changed the facts. Then my father asked the question I had waited years to hear. "Why didn't you tell us you were this angry?" "I did," I said. "Every time I asked you to respect me. Every time I asked Vanessa to repay me. Every time I said Noah deserved the same love as the other grandchildren. You heard me. You simply believed I would never do anything." They left in silence. Over the next week the truth spread through the family. At first, relatives called me cruel. They had heard that I was evicting my retired parents because Vanessa gave Noah the wrong bread. So I stopped protecting everyone's reputation. I shared the financial timeline, the signed agreements, the unauthorized loan application, and the photograph from dinner with the relatives who contacted me. I did not exaggerate. I did not insult anyone. I let the record speak. The calls changed. An aunt apologized for judging me. An uncle offered Vanessa a temporary apartment over his garage, but only if she paid rent. Daniel admitted he had known she lived in the basement. He also admitted my parents planned to use the business loan to repay several of Vanessa's other debts. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him. Because they said you'd stop it. They were right. Vanessa eventually signed a repayment agreement. She sold the SUV, paid $9,000 immediately, and agreed to monthly payments for the rest. Her lender canceled the fraudulent application before releasing money, and because no funds had been distributed, the matter ended without criminal charges. That was more mercy than she believed I had given her. My parents chose not to remain in the house. Pride would not allow them to live under an agreement I enforced. They moved into a smaller retirement apartment they could afford. I sold the Cedar Ridge house 6 months later. After paying the remaining obligations, I placed part of the proceeds into an education trust for Noah. I donated another portion to a local organization that provides weekend meals to children who might otherwise go hungry. The house that once represented everything I had sacrificed became something better. It became security for my son and food for children, whose empty plates no one else noticed. My relationship with my family did not magically heal. Real life rarely works that way. Daniel began visiting us without asking for money or favors. My father sent Noah a handwritten apology. It took my son several weeks to answer, but when he did, he drew a picture of two people fishing together. My mother struggled longer. She kept saying she had not personally taken the food away from Noah. I finally told her that silence at a table can be as cruel as the person holding the bread. Months later, she asked to meet us at a restaurant. When we arrived, there was a place setting for Noah. My mother had ordered nothing before we came. She waited until he chose his meal first. It was a small gesture, and it did not erase the past. But it was the first time she showed me she understood. As for Vanessa, we remained distant. She made every payment, although some arrived at the last possible moment. Losing the illusion that someone would always rescue her forced her to take steady work. Perhaps that was the first real gift I had ever given her. One evening, nearly a year after that terrible dinner, Noah and I grilled steaks on the balcony of our new townhouse. He helped brush butter onto corn and proudly carried the napkins outside. When we sat down, he looked at the extra steak on the serving plate. "Who is that one for?" he asked. "Anyone who comes to our table hungry," I said. He thought about that, then smiled. Even if they were mean before, we can feed someone without giving them permission to hurt us. That was the lesson I wanted him to remember. Kindness does not require surrender. Generosity does not mean allowing people to use you, and family is not defined by who shares your name. It is defined by who refuses to let your child sit hungry while they feast. For years, I had believed love meant keeping everyone comfortable, even when their comfort cost me my dignity. But that night taught me something I will never forget. Sometimes the most loving thing you can place on the family table is not another meal, another check, or another excuse. Sometimes it is a boundary. And once I served mine, no one in my family ever mistook my kindness for weakness again.